So here are some things that confuse me about driving in Australia versus the UK. So one random thing that I've discovered since being in Australia is you can't park on the other side of the road. You can only park on the side of the road that you're traveling in the direction that you're traveling. So for example, if you're driving and obviously you're on the left, you can only park on the left-hand side of the road. You can't park on the right unless you do a U-turn and then come back to be on that side of the road. Whereas in the UK, that's not a thing. You can park on any side of the road. You can cut across the road if you want to, and you can also park in any direction, doesn't really matter. But that's not something that you can do in Australia. The other weird thing that's quite specific to Melbourne is something called a hook turn. So it's basically when you want to turn right, but you have to get into a special lane on the left. So it feels a bit counterintuitive because you're getting over to the left, but actually you're turning right. And it's something I think only exists in some parts of Australia, then Melbourne is one of them. So that does take some getting used to because there's always signs that say hook turn, but it does feel really weird when you're doing it because it feels like you shouldn't be doing it. In general, one thing that does confuse me a little bit is when you're at a traffic light and you're turning left or right, often the cars in the other direction can also go. So they're going straight, but you want to cut across. So you have to wait for those cars to come before you can turn. Whereas in the UK, you don't tend to have that. We tend to have a filter light that is just for you to turn to the left or the right and no one else can come. And it's the same with things like pedestrians. Obviously, pedestrians always get priority, but there could be pedestrians crossing and you have to sort of, as you're going, stop if a pedestrian walks out. Whereas in the UK, it tends to be that there will be a green man symbol for just the pedestrians and just the cars, and you don't necessarily get a mix between the two. Not always. It does exist, but not always. And then also in general, Australian roads are just so big and the network is so vast that you'll often have 6-lane highways or 4-lane highways. In the UK, it's just not a thing. You get motorways that have 3 lanes, but other than that, that's it. Here in Australia, quite often you're like, oh, I need to get to this exit, and you're in 4 lanes and you've got to cross traffic, a bit like in America. And it's really, really weird for a UK person because that's just not a thing that we do very often. The roads here are just so big that you really have to keep an eye on where you're going and which exit you need so you can make sure you're in the correct lane. But yeah, driving here is great though, but just a few things you've got to look out for if you're moving here from the UK.